last year when pilots went on strike for 3 days. There were no services from KQ, and we kept losing, I think, something to the tune of about 300 million shillings every day. Obviously, that is detrimental to the running of the airline. But no, in the sense that whereas, yes, there's been industrial action in the past, it's not so detrimental as to sink KQ into the kind of hole that it has found itself in the past. And that industrial action, just like last year's, has always been managed. They've always come to a compromise of sorts, and work has always moved on. Yeah,
I'm going to go back to that light at the end of the tunnel, because something must inform that. And looking at the numbers that we saw this year, it seems to put a glimmer of hope in the minds of a lot of people.
Correct.
And I'm sure the continent needs the success story of more than just one or two when it comes to airlines. We've seen South Africa go. We saw years ago where fleets in West Africa went down. What is the hope? What informs this that, okay, things are on the up and up?
Well, for like we've said, for the first time in 6 years, we've turned an operating profit, which shows that the business is viable. It's not a net profit, and we cannot turn a net profit until the legacy debt issue is resolved. As long as that is the elephant in the room, as long as you have the legacy debt, however you
much operating profit you make,
whatever operating profit you make, whatever operating efficiency you imbue in the airline, you will always make a net loss. But you still make a net profit, basically showing that whatever you put in, whatever you're using to sustain the airline in terms of employee salaries and that sort of thing, enables you to still have some money left over at the end of the day. You meet your expenses, your operating expenses. That is a good thing. So taking care of legacy debt is just the only thing now. That's why I say this light at the end of the tunnel. The management of KQ got into a project called Kifaru, Project Kifaru, about 3 years ago, because at the time then, there was no hope, there was no glimmer of light whatsoever in terms of operating profit, and by extension, nothing in terms of net profitability. But after the workings of Project Kifaru, we now see that we've turned an operating profit, and there are different metrics that show you that indeed KQ is turning around. You know, you look at the load factors on the plane.
What's that?
Yeah, load factors basically the number of people that are traveling on KQ, the number of passengers that you have on a plane, how the capacity that you have, over a given period of time. Yeah, so we have very favorable load factors. I think we are nearing the global average, in terms of what is acceptable. You look at the available seat kilometers, which is basically technical jargon for the capacity that has been deployed. Post-COVID, airlines began to open up gradually. Planes began to fly, limited capacity on limited routes. Now you have KQ basically getting back to its pre-COVID capacity. We have planes now up in the air, virtually all the planes, and we have more capacity. We are covering more destinations now than we were previously. So those are things that show you that KQ is turning around.
It's turning around.
Yeah, when you look at the revenues now that KQ is getting, I think there's an uplift of about 56 billion shillings, in terms of revenue. 56% rather of what was last year for the same period this year. That's something. The number of passengers, I think 2.1 million for the half year, compared to about 1.8 million shillings for the same period last year, shows you that things are happening. Something is happening.
I have to ask this question though. There are those who say that the composition of a board is also very crucial to the running of a business. KQ board at the time of the Mawingo project and the borrowing, what role did they play in this fiasco that we keep referring to as legacy debt? Because that was the summation of it. And then when we look at the current board that we have, can they take credit for what is happening as we see as a turnaround? That's question number one. Question number two, there's a time back when there was some $1 billion or so that was supposed to have been borrowed from some Exim Bank for buying new aircrafts and engines. If indeed that loan was taken, and if indeed those aeroplanes were bought, and if indeed the engines were actually bought, where are they?
Okay, to answer your question, the first question to do with the board, yes, I mean, the composition of our board is good. I mean, as in, you need to have talent. The board needs to have talent that cuts across different sectors of the aviation industry or management, basically. And yes, in the past, we had excellent boards that made great decisions that got KQ flying. Of course, there were issues, but subsequently, we had board members from KLM, which was a partner of KQ at the time, and who came and they had veto power, vetoed some of the decisions that would have benefited KQ, and ensured that lucrative routes that KQ had then were assigned to the KLM Air France side of the equation. Yes, so to that end, we had competent people on the board, but the decisions that they made were not in the interests of Kenya Airways. They were self-serving interests. Currently, yes, we have a great board. You know, the function of a board is basically to set strategy, to give direction. The board is not involved in the day-to-day running of the company. That you leave to management. So we have a great board. It has a great strategy. Kifaru is part of the strategy. And we have a great management team in place that is executing that strategy. Seen in the fact that KQ is turning around. KQ is now looking at operational profitability.
Yeah.
And once a way has been found to
retire
the legacy debt, then KQ will return to net profitability.
Leonard,
Yes.
last week we hosted a pilot.
Yeah.
And he was talking about those two factors, the composition of the board. And you're saying, as pilots, many of them sit and say, an airline such as ours should have certain competencies at the board level. So people who understand the operations of an airline, those who understand the context of Kenya Airways. And he was arguing, we need to have a pilot on the board, a retired pilot. We have many who have served Kenya Airways for long in other areas. Maybe we need to have an engineer on the board. Then other stakeholders. Kenya Airways is making a lot of money from, so for example, export of all these flowers and cut flowers and all. Why don't we have some of these private sector players who are representing specific interests sitting on the board? So the decisions that are being made are also informed by what the market needs. What do you say to that?
If say, a pilot who sat on the board figured a way out to retire the legacy debt, then I would say, by all means, have a pilot on board. But a pilot is, with all due respect, a glorified driver. With all due respect.
Mr. Kabaho, you're being unfair.
With all due respect. Why? Because
All right.
his job is to move equipment from one point to the other.
Yes.
He doesn't know anything to do with finance.
He would not. He or she would
Okay.
not
He's a
have
pilot.
vested
Okay.
stake.
Let me look at it. Let me look at this.
Let's
Let me
take that.
let me look at it this way.
Go on.
Let me look at it this way. I have a SACCO. I'm the head of a Matatu SACCO.
Yes.
Maybe I have like about 100 Matatu.
Fleet of 100.
Fleet of 100.
Yeah.
I need financing to expand my fleet to say 200 Matatus.
One expertise that you need.
So, of course, now I will go to my drivers or my
Right.
head driver, or my manager, and ask him to recommend the kind of matatu that I will need, to serve my needs. But I will not look at him to guide me on procuring finances.
Why
from the board,
not?
From
If
the
you,
bank.
if you have a table that has 7 seats, all right? So you'll have one person who understands finance and management.
Correct.
But also it's important that they have some context of finance and management in the transport sector.
Yeah.
Not somebody who has finance of farming coming to do finance. So, right? Would you also say that let me also have somebody who has actually plied these routes, who knows the routes, who knows when you talk about if the strategy is let's change this, he runs this
And
particular.
has sufficient interaction with other players
Yeah.
in other parts of the world.
Yes.
That's why you need a board, a professional board in terms of whatever they do, and that's why you need managers. Now, from the management side is when you draw the expertise that you're looking for,
Okay.
which KQ has. I mean, look at the managers that they have. they have an operations director. He's part of the management team. He does not sit on the board, but he's part of the management team. He's a pilot with 17,000 hours, flying hours experience. That's a very experienced guy.
But can you imagine?
Most of the guys in KQ have, say, about 7,000 flying hours.
Can you imagine
Yeah.
this very experienced pilot being made to implement a strategy that has been made by a matatu driver?
Or someone who's on the board and they are a banker because they have lent Kenya Airways money, or someone who's on the board and the chairman of some commodity that is exported. So
you need to look at the problem that KQ faces, and you need to structure your board accordingly. The problem with KQ right now is not operations. If it was operations, like I'm saying, then you'd need a pilot on board to handle the problem.
Clearly, it has been operations for a while.
The problem...
That's why they are turning an operating profit for the first time in very many years.
The problem is finance. And the reason why they had problems with operations is because they had debt. You operate, but the revenues that you get are not enough to service the debt. That is why they have people who have experience in structuring finance, the financial aspects of the airline. Yeah, that's why you have experienced negotiators now who will go to the lessors and talk to them and say, look, this is the contract that we have, and this is what we propose that you do so that we are able to service that contract. So it's a win-win for everyone. I can guarantee you, unless a pilot has gone to business school, he will not have that expertise
sitting on the board.
Yeah, but I can guarantee you that.
But you're assuming that just because someone is a pilot, they don't have any other expertise except that of flying the plane. Surely is that assumption a fair assumption?
No. I mean, when they have other aspects of expertise, then they are put in the management team. I have just given an example.
But you're limiting.
I've given you an example of the current director of operations, who was headhunted for the unique skill set that he brings.
You see,
and he's turning around the operations of the company. So he's useful. He's useful at that point. Yeah.
Look, I'm looking at an organization like, say, NSSF, and I'm looking at how that board, people who head unions end up in that board of NSSF. You know why? Because it's people who contribute to
representing a critical stakeholder.
Exactly. Now, how then do you leave pilots? They're a critical stakeholder, if you ask me. I don't know even how to look at it.
Their voice is represented already by the fact that they're in the management team. That is where we need them. Let me look at it this way.
Flip it.
When you look at the board of KQ as currently composed, where do you see any issue? Do you find any issues with the board of KQ as currently composed?
Yeah, there's lack of piloting expertise.
No, what will piloting expertise do to the board? How will it retire the legacy debt? Because that is the problem.
No.
The problem is the legacy debt.
That is the major problem. It's a main problem, right?
Yeah.
As you now start thinking about what else, how else do we make this thing lean? How else do we make this thing work better? So you'll have all these other expertise. You'll have financial expertise coming in. What's wrong with having one of those, an engineer, a pilot, sitting on the board as well? And this is somebody who's coming, maybe the same way you're saying, the current operations director, about that person actually sitting on the board and giving that experience and saying, guys, I have been up in the air for many years. I have talked to very many pilots. I've studied many airlines. They're also, remember, when they were a small boy, just like Leonard Kafafa, they wanted to be up in the air. They're enthusiasts. They ended up working in this as pilot, but they are enthusiasts. The same way you are an enthusiast, yet you're a communications person.
And maybe let
me say, before you go any further, there's an American expression to the effect that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
It's broke.
It's not broken.
This one is broken.
It's not broken. It's working. It was broken in the past. It was fixed by the current board and management team.
Okay.
That is why we are turning an operating profit. It was broken in the past. No doubt about it. Between 2013 and say 2019, when the current board and management team came into place, it was broken.
Can I ask?
Now it is...
Story takes us to a short